I think it's going to be the greatest mental health crisis in the history of the country. That's what Mark Halpern said to Tucker Carlson when Tucker Carlson asked him what he thought would happen if Donald Trump were to win this election, and I think he's absolutely right. Hi, everybody. I'm Bill Whittle here with Steve Green and Scott Ott. Gentlemen, Steve's episode this week on Right Angle was about the repulsive tactics of this push towards Hitler. Trump is Hitler and all of his followers are Nazis, this desperation, slander, and so on. And during that particular segment, we talked about how not only unfair it was to Republicans, but also how it basically just vanished the victims of actual Nazism. But the question I have for you two guys is, we're a week away from the election, a little less than by the time that this airs. And my question to you is, what if Donald Trump wins and Mark Halpern is right? What the Democrats have done by going all in on the Hitler thing is to take that, whatever that percentage of their hardcore constituents is, whatever that number is, it's certainly tens of millions of people. What happens when they wake up, if they wake up, and they find out that Hitler has been elected president of the United States? We've all seen the montage of people losing their minds on the night of Trump's victory in 2016. Steve, I didn't think it was possible looking at how they reacted in 2016, but I honestly think that if Trump wins on November 5th, it's going to be much worse for them. They're gonna be. I can tell you that from the Trump presidency, during the duration of the Trump presidency, significant numbers of people were in therapy, talking to their psychologists about how they barely can function, knowing that Trump is president. I think this is going to be really. I think Halpern's right. I think it's going to be a national crisis of lunacy.
I'm afraid you're right. And what just occurred to me is that you have to remember one of the reasons Trump became the GOP nominee in 2016 was CNN and MSNBC gave him, I can't even remember how many millions of dollars of value in screen time they gave to Trump because they thought, let's hope the crazy real estate TV host become the GOP nominee and Hillary will walk all over him. So CNN was showing his rallies unedited, uncut, just really helping to hype up the Trump train. And it wasn't until he secured the nomination, which I think was April or early May of 2016, that the media did its very predictable 180 and pronounced Trump the next Hitler, because that's what every GOP presidential candidate is, going back to at least 1944, as I mentioned in my segment this week. And so between May and November of 2016, you only had a few months there of ramping up the scare machine against Donald Trump, and he eked out a victory. Thank goodness. Hillary would have robbed us blind. So he's still working on it, and now Joe Biden's done it. But I got off track. You only had a few months of hyping up this mental anguish hype machine against the bad orange man, and yet we still had everything that we saw. And they ramped up that machine for 4 years while he was in the White House. Yep. So that by the time he was finally gone, every viewer of The View not only was convinced that this was the worst president we'd ever had, that he was literally Hitler, but Bill, what I see is people's self-identities wrapped up in the virtue that they feel based on their hatred of Donald Trump.
That's right. That's exactly right.
And
you said in the last segment that it appealed to their vanity. I think that was exactly right.
Oh, yeah, that's in Scott's segment. Everybody watch Scott's segment, too. It's going to be really awesome. We make fun of Jeff Bezos in the Washington Post. So you don't miss that. But getting back to Donald Trump. So we've now had 10 years. Wait, how many years? 8 years of this ramping up. And it looks like he's the odds-on favorite to win next Tuesday. And what do you call it? I'm not a psychiatrist or a psychologist, but what do you call it when you are confronted with your worldview, your vanity, your ego being wrapped up in a notion that A, is going to be proven by all those Nazi voters on election day, and then B, is going to be disproven when Trump is not literally Hitler for his second term. It's funny that the guy who is literally Hitler really didn't do any Hitlery things while he was president, but
Yeah. He was saving it for his second term.
This time they mean it. It's going to happen for sure. But without endorsing anything Hitlerish, he was a bad man, the worst. You should see the stuff this guy did. Sorry, I'm going on a little Trump rant here. If Trump were to do just one Hitlery-ish, Hitler-adjacent type thing in his second term, it would be this: to take every celebrity who promised to move to Canada if Trump were reelected and put them in trains, put them in cattle cars, and send them north to Canada.
I just have to get this said. What the progressives don't understand is if Donald Trump were to become the person that they accuse him of being, it's the conservatives with the guns that would go and get him out of office.
Oh, hell yeah.
If he actually became the tyrant that they say, and he was arresting Joy Behar for having a different opinion or criticizing Donald Trump, it's the conservatives that would march to the White House and pry him out of there at bayonet point. They just don't get it, and they never will. Scott, I saw Jimmy Kimmel being asked about the possibility of a Trump win by Joe Scarborough. And Kimmel looked like he was 100 years old. He said, I haven't slept for 4 days. I still can't prepare myself for the possibility that it might happen. And I just want you to think about that sentence. I can't prepare myself for the possibility that it might happen. I'm feeling pretty good about this election, but I am fully prepared for the possibility that we could lose this thing. I think any normal, rational adult looks at a situation that is essentially a somewhat lopsided, still coin toss, and prepares themselves for the possibility that this may not go their way. There is a entire generation. I've noticed it from police body cam footage. It tends to be younger women who are so ruled by emotion that if this thing happens, I think their emotional reaction is going to be an actual genuine crisis. I'll just wrap up my question to you, Scott, by simply saying this. I've seen hundreds of videos of people tearing down Donald Trump signs. I've never seen a single video of a Donald Trump supporter knocking a Kamala Harris sign over or throwing a coffee on somebody because they admitted that they're voting for a Democrat.
Well, just so many questions come to mind. I mean, I wonder how Jimmy Kimmel's career was derailed and devastated during the last Trump administration. I mean, somehow he managed to continue.
He was waiting for his second term.
Yeah, somehow he managed to continue in his chosen profession, making millions of dollars, even when for a while he had to broadcast his show from like his own house because of a pandemic. Which wasn't really anything to do with Donald Trump, but that, and I think that the psychotherapy and psychopharmaceuticals industries are in for, sunshine days in the coming months if Trump gets reelected. I was thinking, like, when you just talked about that, like, what's the reaction if Donald Trump wins? There are some people on the other side who will literally be screaming and crying. If Kamala Harris wins, I think by and large the reaction on the other side is just kind of like, let's get back to work.
It'll be a body blow, I'll tell you that much.
What's that?
But yeah. It'll be a body blow, but we'll show up here the next Tuesday doing everything we can.
It's like my attitude will be, well, I guess the beatings will have to continue until morale improves.
Yeah.
Huh?
It's just like an ugh on one side and a scream on the other side, and
that's exactly right.
And I think, and I want to be clear, we don't believe that young women in general have this kind of reaction. It's just that the videos tend to be more of young women having this reaction. There's no broad categorization of young women or any particular generation of women who've got this huge problem. There are a few people who wind up getting very famous on the internet. So it's, I think in any case, this is a cycle. I mean, you go through this every 2 years, every 4 years. Sometimes you win, sometimes you don't win, and you've got to be ready to deal with the consequences of that. You try to. There have been many people in the past who've said that Americans like divided government because it prevents the government from doing too much. So if the other side gets the White House, you kind of hope that your side gets
Well, Steve Scott's been having some problems at his house. I think he's having electrical problems, but I think we got the gist of what he's saying.
Yeah. And let me just throw in one thing.
Sure.
I think Scott was right. It's of course not all young women who are going to have psychotic breaks if Trump wins, but the whiter and purpler they are, the greater those odds become.
Reason I made that generalization in the first place was because of a study that was done not too long ago that basically said, asked the question, have you ever been told by a doctor that you might have a mental health condition? And conservative men over a certain age, the number was 16%, and for liberal women under a certain age, it was 54%. 54% of those surveyed. And this wasn't a poll. This was across, the number of people being treated for mental health issues. But look, it doesn't matter. My attitude, if we lose, is, and I'm going to offer this up to the progressives and the Democrats as solace, because this will be the solace that I will use if we lose the election. My multiple trips out of Los Angeles into the heart of America have shown me that the foundational core of this country is not only fine, but I believe incorruptible. And the sentence that I've come to rely on now, when dealing with the despair and the angst of watching so many institutions being corrupted and so on, is that the government is not the country. The government's not the country. This is about the government. It's not about the country. The country is sound, and the progressives will continue to live their lives surrounded by other progressives, and they can take in as much of this as they want to, or ignore as much of it as they want to. I do not believe the United States of America can be destroyed, and certainly not by weenies like this. If we win this election, and I believe things are looking very good that we will, then we get a soft landing. If we lose the election, then we get a hard landing. But what we know for a certain fact is that the policies that have turned San Francisco into a ghost town, the policies that have turned New York City into an unlivable, gigantic refugee camp, the policies that promote division and anger and hatred and competition and all the rest of it are not sustainable. They cannot last. So as I said, we're going to find out soon enough whether or not we get the hard landing or the soft landing. And if we get the hard landing, then as I said, then the country has not had enough punishment yet in order to change the way it votes. I think every sign I see out there says that there's a fundamental change in the electorate in the last 4 years. But if not, then not. But I don't believe the same is true for the hardcore adherents on the other side. Hardcore conservatives realize if Kamala Harris wins, we're in for 4 years run by an idiot and a shadow of smoke on the wall. Hardcore progressives think that if Donald Trump wins, they and their families are going to be put on trains and taken off to either re-education or extermination camps, and that special forces teams are going to come into the view and start gunning down political opponents. This is what they say, not what I say. This is what they say. So yes, it's going to be a mental health crisis of unparalleled dimensions, and we better strap in, because even good news can be bad news in a case where the rhetoric has been turned up to this level. For Steve Green and Scott Ott, who is currently trying to fix the electricity in his house out in Texas, I'm Bill Whittle. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.